Welcome back to the Gweilo 60 channel. Today I'm going to teach the American people how they can compete with China. And you know, it's not brain surgery by any means. I've been living in China for over 20 years now, and I've watched how they've grown a country in the last 20-30 years to be at par with the United States and going to overtake the United States. Sure, they got 1.4 billion people, but just 20 years ago, they were rice farmers and fishermen. And now they've got the largest manufacturing base in the entire world. Their technology is off the scale. The buildings, like here, let me turn around. The buildings that they build are second to none in the entire world. They've got an economy. How did they build such a strong country in such a short time? As the United States is getting weaker economically, militarily, their reputation around the world is getting more tarnished as days go by, and they're wondering, how the hell can we compete with this Chinese problem that we've got, because they think China's a problem, and you all see that on the news every day. So I guess it starts out in grade 1. What you need to do is teach your children well, I guess is what it comes down to, and push your children a little bit harder. In the West, you know, you go to kindergarten, it's playtime. You go to grade 1, 2, 3, 4, they don't even do grades anymore, so there's no competition. In China, it's a different story. There is competition from day one, and the parents know it, so they push their children to try to get them to do it the best they possibly can. Learn, learn, learn. Study, study, study. And you think, oh, this is hard on the children. Well, it may be hard on the children, but when they grow up and they have that work ethic, going through grade school, going through middle school, going through high school, going through college or university, they build that work ethic that builds a strong, educated, knowledgeable workforce. See, the United States doesn't have that. They've got a bunch of limp dicks over there. Like, seriously, they're more worried about their gender identification than they are about their job. And that's what makes China a powerhouse right today. But you see, it doesn't stop there. What you got to do now that you've got a good educated group of people, and it'll take a couple of generations to get there, so you're going to fall to number 2 or number 3 in the world, but you can work your way back up, guys. You know, all you got to do is have a little bit of motivation. But another thing that you've got to do is you've got to stop the drugs. Legalizing drugs just makes a stupid society, a stupid, drugged up society. They can't go to work. Their brains are fried. It takes tax dollars to take care of these useless drug addicts that are shitting and pissing all over your streets. Tents, homeless camps in the parks. You've got to get rid of that. You see, in China, you get caught with drugs, you go to jail. You get caught with too much drugs, you get the death penalty, and it keeps the streets clean. I'm in a park. There's 1.4 billion people in the country. There's 9 million, just about 9 million people in Nanning alone. And well, actually, there's nobody in the park today, really, because it's 33 degrees. I'm the dumb one, because I wasn't educated like a Chinese person. I don't know any better, you know. So you got to educate your children, push them. And when you're pushing your children to do their education, it has to be both help from the mother and the father. Not just the mother, not just the father. It has to be both. And you see, that's another problem with the United States, where they have a high rate of single parenthood. The dads just get up and bugger off. See, in China, they're family oriented. So there's not a lot of divorce, and there's always a mother and father around. Well, not always, but the vast majority families have a mother and father. Okay, so the mother and father both help, not only with the school, but the extracurricular activities. So as you're teaching your children well, they have extracurricular activities, they have a strong family, they have, you got it, they've got morality. in China, where in the Western world, how can you have morality if you come from a broken home? If dad's a drug addict, mom's a drug addict. If you don't take your schooling seriously, if you don't have a chance to buy a home or excel at anything because your government has spent all of the money on making wars around the world. Another thing, you got to start spending money where it's supposed to be spent. Don't spend it on wars, don't spend it on bombs, don't spend it on the military-industrial complex like you have in the past. What you need to do is you need to stop your government from spending on that, stop the industrial complex from spending money on bombs and whatever, building bombs and whatever, and build infrastructure, subways, roads, manufacturing plants, new airports, high-speed train systems. Make it easier for your people to get around. Not only for your people to get around, but goods and services to get around the country. Better ports. You see, you could spend more money on the things that matter to the people in the United States. Like, well, you know, it's not just that way, and it's not just this way, and it's not just this way. It's every way in China. They're building infrastructure all day, every day, 365 days a year, and they're doing a mass urbanization, and it's good for the economy. Build your manufacturing plants. It'll take time, and you'll have to probably lower wages so that you can compete with the likes of China, because their wages are lower, people work longer hours, and they don't complain about it. Why? Because they've developed that good work ethic from kindergarten all the way through university. They've had a good role model from both their mother and their father that aren't drug addicts. They have they look at because they have a government like they do in China, they look at the future as it's getting better for them and their children and their grandchildren, instead of getting worse. Where in the West, you see it getting worse and worse and worse. I know. I've lived in the United States and I've lived in Canada. I grew up in the 60s and 70s and 80s and 90s and 2000, 2010, 2020, and I've been in both countries throughout that whole time period. And I know what it used to be like, where dad could go to work, mom could stay home with 3 kids, you'd have a house, a white picket fence, 2 cars, and life was easy, and you could live off that wage, that one wage. And now both parents have to work, if there's both parents. If not, you're basically screwed, glued, and tattooed, because you're going to be in poverty for the rest of your life, and that's what your children are going to grow up to do, live in poverty. They'll go to daycare when they're not in school. If they're preschoolers, they'll grow up in daycares where they're just basically treated like animals in a cage, and they learn absolutely nothing. So the whole system has to change. The mindset of the American people have to change so that they can compete with China, but not just with China, with other countries like Vietnam and Brazil and the Philippines and all of the different places around the world that are coming up and going in the positive direction because they have those morals and they have hope for the future, and they treat their children in the right way. They don't baby them like the Western people do. They make them work and get good work ethics. They frown upon drugs in all of these Southeast Asian countries and China, so that if you get caught in Singapore, the penalties are the same as in China. Same with Malaysian, same with Indonesian, same with Vietnam, and same with, so when I was going to say Thailand, but they legalized marijuana, so, but then Thailand is just it's a different type of beast, I tell you. I've been there a number of times, and it just dances to a different drummer. But you can see how China is doing so much better by just looking around. And, this is a park in the middle of the city. This is Nanhu Park, actually, part of Nanhu Park, and there's fish everywhere. So the idea that people say polluted. It's not anymore. It used to be. 20 years ago, you couldn't see across the street in Beijing because the air was so brown. But because they have a government, they saw that they had a problem, so then they turned around and they fixed that problem. In the West, the politicians, that's another thing. You got to get rid of those politicians and the way that they think. You got to get rid of the lobbyists. You've got to get rid of the politicians with open pockets, so that they're working for the people. If they're not working for the people, fire their asses and get somebody in there that will work for the people. Because you know what? In China, if a politician doesn't do what's best for his constituents in his area, he gets fired and they put somebody else in his position. And that's the way it should be. So there's a whole battery of different things that you could do in America to compete with China. You just choose not to. Or your politicians choose not to. And when they choose not to, guys and girls, they're fucking you up. And pretty soon you're going to be the third world country and China's going to be the first world country. Well, actually, I think it's still a developing country, but you sure as hell wouldn't know it by walking around some of these cities. I'm telling you, you get into the rural areas, they still have work to do. Definitely. The education isn't as good. The healthcare isn't as good. The roads aren't as good, but they're working on it. And I think because of their mass urbanization, a lot of those farming communities well, people from the farming communities are moving into the cities and they're getting a better life. And then they're starting that cycle of putting their kids in school and mom and dad taking care of them and pushing them to do better in school so they get better grades. Because if you don't get good grades here in China, you do not go to the best university. If you do not go to the best university, you do not get the best jobs and you don't get as much money. So, and money is God here in China, and anybody that says it's not hasn't lived in China very long. Anyway, that's my story to the American people today, to tell them how to compete with China. I'm not telling you that you can't compete with China. You sure as hell can, but you just got to change your ways. You've got to look at it differently, and you've got to make some hard decisions. Parents have to stay together. No drugs. Teach your children well. Get rid of the shitty politicians. You know, build infrastructure instead of bombs. There's so many things, and it's common sense. Listen, the conservative, what is Pierre Poilievre in Canada? Common sense conservatives. Be a common sense conservative and fire your government. Start working on your children and making sure that the next couple of generations will make a strong workforce, a smart workforce, an educated workforce, and then you might be able to compete with the people in the East, because right now you sure as hell aren't. What you're trying to do is you're trying to sanction them. You're trying to screw them over so that they can't advance as fast as they normally would. That's no way to compete. That's just putting it off a little bit longer. And you know it's happening because you're trying to put it off a little bit longer. Anyway, that's another video from Gweilo 60 from Nanhu Park here in Nanning, China. 2 days, guys, and I'm going to be in the Philippines. So stay tuned for that little series, and like, comment, subscribe. Until next time, peace out. Bye now.